Imagine an empire so vast, it stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the heart of Europe. An empire built on speed, fear, and unrivaled military genius. From the deserts of Mongolia to the heart of China, the Mongol Empire's rise and fall shaped the course of history in ways no one could have predicted. But how did a tribe of nomadic warriors evolve into the largest contiguous empire the world has ever seen? And why, despite its dominance, did it eventually crumble into fragmented khanates? Today, we'll uncover the entire history of the Mongol Empire and explore its lasting legacy. Stick around, because what you're about to discover will change the way you think about empire building and world history. The rise of the Mongol Empire, origins and early history. The Mongol Empire, one of the largest empires in history, spanned vast territories from the Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe. But how did this mighty empire rise from the steppes of Mongolia? To understand the full scope of the Mongol Empire's history, we must first explore its origins, the events leading up to its formation, and the early days of its explosive growth. The land and people. The Mongols originated from the vast, harsh steppes of Central Asia, a region with a long history of nomadic cultures. This was a land where survival depended on the ability to endure extreme weather, rough terrain, and fierce competitors. The Mongol people, known for their skills in horsemanship, archery, and warfare, were deeply rooted in a nomadic lifestyle, relying on their herds of horses, sheep, and cattle for sustenance. These steppes were a crossroads of cultures, where the ancient Silk Road connected the East and the West. The Mongols were not isolated, but were part of a complex network of traders, invaders, and conquerors who had lived in the region for centuries. The Mongols had frequent interactions with neighboring tribes, including the Khitan, the Jurchen, and the Uyghur, each leaving their mark on Mongol society and culture. The tribal structure. Mongol society was organized into various tribes, each led by a chief or khan. These tribes were often in competition, constantly fighting over resources, land, and power. At the beginning of the 12th century, the Mongol tribes were fragmented and lacked unity. The region was home to constant warfare, with various tribes vying for dominance over the others. However, this would soon change with the rise of a figure who would forever alter the course of history. The birth of Temujin. The pivotal figure in the rise of the Mongol Empire was a man named Temujin, later known as Genghis Khan. Temujin was born around 1162 to a tribal leader named Yasujiai, a member of the Borjigin clan, one of the many Mongol clans that inhabited the steppes. The circumstances surrounding Temujin's early life were harsh, filled with struggle and adversity. At the age of 9, Temujin's father was poisoned by a rival tribe, leaving the young boy and his family to fend for themselves in the unforgiving steppe. The family was abandoned by their clan, and Temujin was forced to grow up in poverty. He learned to survive through sheer determination and the support of his mother, who played an instrumental role in his early life. Despite his difficult circumstances, Temujin showed remarkable leadership qualities from a young age. His ability to inspire loyalty, forge alliances, and unite different tribes would later become key elements of his success. However, his rise was not without opposition. In his early years, he faced betrayal, rivalry, and even enslavement at the hands of enemy tribes. But through a combination of cunning, strength, and a growing following, Temujin began to carve a path towards power. The rise of Temujin. Temujin's journey towards becoming the leader of the Mongols began when he reunited with his blood brother, Jamukha, who had been a close companion during their youth. Together, they began to unite the fragmented Mongol tribes. However, their relationship soured when they disagreed on how to rule the Mongol people. Temujin advocated for a meritocratic system, where the most capable men would rise to positions of power, regardless of their tribal background. Jamukha, on the other hand, believed in the traditional aristocratic system, where positions were determined by birth and lineage. This ideological clash led to a bitter conflict between the two, culminating in the Battle of Dallin Bal's Hut in 1187. Despite the defeat, Temujin's reputation as a leader continued to grow. After this conflict, Temujin began to consolidate his power, making strategic alliances with various tribes. He understood that in order to unite the Mongol people, he needed to eliminate the traditional tribal rivalries that had plagued the region for centuries. Over the years, he expanded his influence, gaining the loyalty of key military leaders, including Kublai, a powerful general, and Subutai, a brilliant strategist. These alliances were crucial for Temujin as they formed the backbone of his future military campaigns. The title of Genghis Khan. By 1206, after years of warfare, diplomacy, and alliance building, Temujin had successfully united the Mongol tribes under his leadership. At a grand assembly called the Kurultai, Temujin was proclaimed Genghis Khan, meaning universal ruler. This title was not only a recognition of his military victories, but also symbolized his dominance over the Mongol people and his vision of creating an empire that would stretch across the known world. The title of Genghis Khan marked the beginning of an unprecedented era in history. Under his leadership, the Mongol Empire would grow at a staggering rate, conquering vast territories and changing the course of world history. But Genghis Khan was not just a warlord. He was also a visionary who sought to create a cohesive and well-organized empire. His military strategies, organizational methods, and legal reforms would lay the foundation for one of the most powerful empires the world has ever seen. Early military campaigns. With the title of Genghis Khan, the Mongols were no longer a collection of disparate tribes. They were now a unified force. Genghis Khan quickly turned his attention to the neighboring kingdoms and empires, focusing on the Jin dynasty in China, which had long been a source of tension for the Mongols. In 1211, Genghis Khan launched his first major military campaign against the Jin dynasty. The Mongols, known for their cavalry and archery skills, used highly effective tactics to overcome the Jin forces. Genghis Khan's army was fast, mobile, and incredibly disciplined, giving them a decisive advantage over the slower, more rigid Jin forces. The Mongols utilized psychological warfare, often leaving a trail of destruction in their wake to instill fear in their enemies. They also employed innovative siege tactics, using catapults and other advanced weapons to break down fortifications. The Mongols' ability to adapt to different battle conditions and employ a range of military strategies was one of the key factors behind their success. By 1215, the Mongols had captured the Jin capital of Zhongdu, modern-day Beijing, a major victory that showcased the military prowess of Genghis Khan's army. This was just the beginning of his conquests, and soon the Mongols would turn their attention to other parts of Asia and beyond. The Mongol conquests expanding the empire. With the title of Genghis Khan and the unification of the Mongol tribes, Temujin, now the undisputed leader, began to turn his ambitions outward. The Mongol Empire was no longer a collection of fragmented tribes. It was a military powerhouse ready to take on the world. Genghis Khan's vision was clear. He sought to create an empire that stretched across Asia, eventually reaching Europe and the Middle East. This was just the beginning of a series of unprecedented military campaigns that would reshape the world forever. The invasion of the Khwarezmian Empire. One of Genghis Khan's first major targets was the Khwarezmian Empire, located in present-day Iran, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and parts of Kazakhstan. The Khwarezmian Empire was a prosperous and powerful state, but it made a critical mistake. In 1218, a Mongol trade caravan traveling through the empire was attacked and its members killed by the Khwarezmian officials. In retaliation, Genghis Khan sent a diplomatic mission to the Khwarezmian Shah, Ala ad-Din Muhammad, requesting that the perpetrators be punished and that trade be allowed to continue. The Shah, either dismissing the Mongol leader or underestimating his power, responded by executing the Mongol envoys and killing the remaining members of the caravan. This act of treachery would prove to be a fatal miscalculation. Genghis Khan, known for his commitment to vengeance, was furious. He swore to annihilate the Khwarezmian Empire for the insult. In 1219, Genghis Khan mobilized one of the most formidable military campaigns in history. His army, which had grown to a force of several 100,000 men, marched westward across the Central Asian steppes, targeting the Khwarezmian cities one by one. Genghis Khan's military strategies were unrivaled, and his use of siege warfare, psychological tactics, and speed gave the Mongols a significant advantage over the Khwarezmian forces. The Mongols' swift and brutal campaign destroyed the cities of Bokhara, Samarkand, and Urgench, all of which fell under Mongol control. In a particularly gruesome episode, after the fall of Samarkand, Genghis Khan's forces captured the city's defenders, and in retaliation for their defiance, massacred the entire population. In the wake of these victories, the Khwarezmian Empire was left in ruins. The Shah, realizing that he could not defeat Genghis Khan's forces, fled to the west, eventually dying in exile. This brutal campaign had far-reaching consequences. It sent a powerful message to the world. Genghis Khan would not tolerate insults, and his empire would expand relentlessly until all who opposed him were destroyed. The invasion of the Jin dynasty. Meanwhile, in the east, Genghis Khan had already turned his attention to the Jin dynasty, a state that controlled much of northern China. The Jin had long been a rival of the Mongols, and their defeat of the Mongol tribes earlier in history had fueled Genghis Khan's desire for revenge. The Mongols had launched several campaigns against the Jin before Genghis Khan's rise, but none had been successful. In 1211, Genghis Khan launched a full-scale invasion of the Jin dynasty, starting with their northern territories. The Mongol military's mobility and their ability to strike swiftly were crucial advantages in this war. The Mongols, skilled in cavalry tactics, would often conduct lightning raids that left the Jin forces scrambling to respond. Over the course of several years, Genghis Khan's army systematically chipped away at the Jin defenses, capturing fortresses and overwhelming their forces in key battles. By 1215, the Mongols had breached the walls of Zhongdu, present-day Beijing, the Jin capital. This victory was a crucial turning point in the Mongol expansion. The Jin dynasty's power was effectively broken, and the Mongols controlled large portions of northern China. The conquest of the Jin dynasty also highlighted Genghis Khan's ability to adapt his military strategies. While the Mongols were known for their mobile cavalry, they were also quick to adopt siege tactics and new technologies, including Chinese gunpowder weapons. This flexibility allowed them to defeat enemies with more advanced technologies, and it demonstrated Genghis Khan's commitment to learning from the cultures he encountered. The Battle of the Indus and the Western Expansion. After consolidating his control over northern China, Genghis Khan turned his attention westward. The Mongol Empire, now firmly established in Central Asia, began to look beyond the borders of China. In 1219, Genghis Khan launched a campaign into the Khwarezmian Empire, but he also sought to expand into the Middle East and beyond. The Mongols faced a difficult challenge in their campaigns against the powerful Islamic empires in the region. However, they were undeterred. Genghis Khan's forces moved swiftly, crossing the vast deserts and mountainous terrain of Central Asia. One of the most significant campaigns of this period was the Mongol invasion of the Western Khwarezmian territories, including Persia, modern-day Iran, and parts of the Caucasus. The Mongols' campaign in the region was characterized by their relentless advance. In 1220, they began the siege of the city of Nishapur, a major Persian city. The city fell after a prolonged siege, and the Mongols massacred its population. This brutal tactic became a hallmark of Genghis Khan's empire. Cities that resisted Mongol conquest often faced total destruction. The Mongols did not stop there. Their armies pressed on into the heart of Persia, and within just a few years, Genghis Khan's empire stretched from China in the east to the Persian Gulf in the west. The success of these campaigns demonstrated the Mongol military's exceptional discipline and the ability of their commanders to execute complex strategies across a wide range of terrains. At the height of Genghis Khan's conquests, the Mongol Empire was an unprecedented force. It stretched across the steppes of Central Asia, the deserts of Persia, and into China. But Genghis Khan's ambitions were far from over. As his empire expanded, the Mongols encountered new cultures, new technologies, and new enemies. With each victory, Genghis Khan solidified his legacy as one of the greatest military leaders in history. The legacy of the conquests. The Mongol conquests under Genghis Khan were not just about military dominance. They were also about creating a lasting empire that would shape the future of Eurasia. Genghis Khan's conquests disrupted established political structures, but they also facilitated cultural exchange and trade across vast regions. The Mongol Empire helped to revive the Silk Road, facilitating the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies between East and West. Genghis Khan's empire promoted trade, and the Pax Mongolica, or Mongol peace, allowed for relative stability across the vast territories under Mongol control. This era of peace helped to foster cultural and intellectual exchange, bringing new ideas to both the East and the West. Despite the violence and destruction associated with Genghis Khan's conquests, his empire laid the groundwork for a new global order. The Mongol Empire became a bridge between different cultures and civilizations, and its impact would continue to be felt long after Genghis Khan's death. The legacy of Genghis Khan governance, laws, and the Mongol way. The Mongol Empire under Genghis Khan was not only a military juggernaut but also a sophisticated, highly organized state. While Genghis Khan is often remembered for his brutal conquests, it is equally important to recognize his contributions to governance, law, and the foundation of an empire that would endure for generations. A vision of unity and administration. One of the key elements of Genghis Khan's success was his ability to govern an empire that stretched across diverse cultures, religions, and peoples. Unlike many conquerors who ruled through fear and oppression alone, Genghis Khan sought to create a stable, unified empire. He realized that to maintain control over such vast territories, he would need to establish a strong administrative system that could integrate different cultures and systems of governance. To achieve this, Genghis Khan appointed trusted generals and officials, often promoting individuals based on merit rather than aristocratic lineage. This was revolutionary at the time, as many societies still operated on rigid, hereditary power structures. Genghis Khan's meritocratic approach allowed talented individuals to rise to positions of influence, regardless of their background. His closest advisors and commanders, including the likes of Kublai, Jeeb, and Subutai, were not necessarily from noble families, but they were highly skilled and loyal, which Genghis Khan valued above all else. To manage such a sprawling empire, Genghis Khan divided his territories into several administrative units, each overseen by a governor or military leader. These leaders were responsible for maintaining order, collecting taxes, and ensuring the loyalty of the population. The Mongols, known for their skill in communication, also established an efficient postal system that allowed for fast and secure transmission of messages across vast distances, ensuring that the central authority remained informed about developments in far-flung provinces. The Yasa, Genghis Khan's legal code. One of Genghis Khan's most significant contributions to the stability of the empire was the creation of the Yasa, a legal code that helped to regulate Mongol society and ensure order within the empire. The Yasa was a set of laws and decrees designed to govern every aspect of life within the Mongol Empire, from military discipline to social behavior. Although many of the details of the Yasa have been lost to history, it is known that it included laws against theft, bribery, and adultery, as well as regulations governing the behavior of soldiers and the treatment of prisoners. The Yasa was known for its strictness, but it also emphasized loyalty, discipline, and respect for the ruler. It was an essential tool for maintaining the cohesion of the Mongol Empire, especially given the diverse ethnic groups and cultures that Genghis Khan had conquered. The law applied equally to all subjects of the empire, regardless of their background, and it helped to create a sense of unity and order amidst the vast and heterogeneous territories. Another important aspect of the Yasa was its religious tolerance. Genghis Khan believed in the importance of maintaining peaceful relations between the different religious communities within his empire. Under his rule, Mongols practiced a policy of religious freedom, allowing the people they conquered to practice their faiths without fear of persecution. This policy was relatively rare in the medieval world, where religious intolerance and conflict were widespread. Diplomacy and the Mongol approach to empire building. Genghis Khan's approach to governance was not purely military. He also relied heavily on diplomacy and strategic alliances to expand and maintain the Mongol Empire. The Mongols were known for their diplomatic flexibility, often seeking alliances with neighboring states to secure their borders or gain an advantage in future campaigns. One of the most notable examples of Mongol diplomacy was their relationship with the Khitan people. The Khitans, a group of nomadic tribes from the steppes, had been a traditional enemy of the Mongols. However, in the early 13th century, Genghis Khan sought to ally with the Khitans against the growing threat of the Jin dynasty. By forging this alliance, Genghis Khan was able to leverage the Khitans' knowledge of warfare and their network of trade routes to strengthen his position. Additionally, Genghis Khan's diplomatic efforts extended beyond his immediate neighbors. He also sought to build connections with the Persian and Islamic world, and in some cases, the Mongols would use diplomacy as a tool to prevent conflict. They often offered terms of peace to rulers who would submit to Mongol rule, promising them autonomy in exchange for loyalty and tribute. The Mongol military, tactics, and innovations. The success of Genghis Khan's empire was built largely on the strength of his military. The Mongol army was renowned for its discipline, mobility, and innovative tactics. Much of the Mongols' success in battle was due to their exceptional cavalry, which made them one of the most effective military forces of the medieval period. The Mongols were expert horsemen, able to ride for long distances while carrying heavy loads of supplies and weapons. Their primary weapon was the composite bow, which was smaller and more powerful than the longbow used by European armies at the time. The Mongols could shoot arrows with deadly accuracy while riding at full speed, a skill that made them almost unstoppable on the battlefield. Their ability to shoot from horseback also allowed them to outmaneuver and overwhelm enemies who were less mobile. In addition to their cavalry, the Mongols also employed a range of other military innovations. They were among the first to use siege warfare on a large scale, and they adopted Chinese gunpowder weapons, including catapults and bombards, to breach fortified cities. This combination of traditional Mongol tactics and new technological innovations allowed them to overcome even the most well-defended cities. One of the key aspects of Mongol military strategy was their use of psychological warfare. The Mongols often employed fear as a tool, spreading terror among their enemies. They would frequently leave entire populations of cities they had captured dead or enslaved, sending a clear message to other cities that resistance would not be tolerated. In many cases, this fear led to cities surrendering without a fight, knowing that the Mongols would show no mercy to those who resisted. Genghis Khan's use of deception was another key element of his military success. Mongol armies often employed feigned retreats, luring enemy forces into traps where they would be surrounded and destroyed. The Mongols also used intelligence networks to gather information on their enemies, enabling them to make informed decisions and anticipate enemy movements. The death of Genghis Khan. As Genghis Khan's empire continued to expand, his focus began to shift. In 1227, while preparing for an invasion of the Western Xia Kingdom in China, Genghis Khan fell ill. His condition worsened, and he died in August of that year, at the age of 65. The exact cause of his death remains a mystery to this day, with theories ranging from illness to an injury sustained during a fall from his horse. Despite his death, Genghis Khan's empire continued to expand under the leadership of his sons and grandsons. His successors, including his son Ogedei Khan, maintained the momentum of his conquests, ensuring that the Mongol Empire became one of the largest empires in history. Genghis Khan's legacy, however, extends far beyond his military conquests. His vision for a unified, meritocratic empire and his ability to integrate different cultures and religions into his empire shaped the world in ways that are still felt today. The successors of Genghis Khan, the Mongol Empire after his death. The death of Genghis Khan in 1227 marked the end of an era for the Mongol Empire, but it did not signal the collapse of the empire he had built. Instead, Genghis Khan's successors would go on to further expand the Mongol Empire, carrying forward his vision and military prowess. However, the empire was also at a crossroads, and the path forward would be marked by challenges and shifts in leadership that would shape the future of the empire. The transition of power. Upon Genghis Khan's death, his eldest son, Gebe, did not immediately assume the title of Khan. Instead, leadership passed to his third son, Ogedei Khan, who was elected by a grand council known as a Kurultai in 1229. This was a defining moment in the Mongol succession. Unlike many other empires where succession was often determined by birthright or force, the Mongols respected the Kurultai as a democratic institution that allowed the greatest leader to rise to power, regardless of lineage. Ogedei Khan was Genghis Khan's chosen successor, but he faced the challenge of continuing the expansion of the Mongol Empire while maintaining the internal unity his father had established. While Genghis Khan had been a force of nature, Ogedi's leadership would be defined by his ability to govern and direct the empire's vast forces. His reign lasted from 1229 to 1241, a period marked by both internal consolidation and territorial expansion. Ogedi Khan's expansion of the empire. Ogedi Khan's leadership was characterized by an aggressive continuation of the Mongol conquest. He began by consolidating the territories already under Mongol control and by pursuing further conquests in the west, including the successful campaigns into Eastern Europe and in the east, where Mongol forces pushed further into the Song dynasty in China. Under Ogedi, the Mongols launched a series of devastating campaigns across Eastern Europe. One of the most significant was the invasion of the Kingdom of Hungary in 1241. The Mongols, led by the brilliant general Subutai, decisively defeated Hungarian forces at the Battle of Mohi, inflicting heavy casualties. This victory sent shockwaves across Europe, and it is said that it was the Mongol invasion that led to widespread fear and confusion throughout the region. However, before the Mongols could fully consolidate their gains in Europe, Ogedi's death in 1241 halted further campaigns in the west. Ogedi also continued his father's policy of religious tolerance and his vision of maintaining a multicultural empire. Under his rule, the Mongols extended their influence over vast regions of Eurasia, including Russia, the Caucasus, and Persia. As a result, the Mongol Empire became the largest contiguous empire in history, stretching from the Pacific Ocean in the east to the Caspian Sea in the west. The fragmentation of the empire. Although Ogedi's reign brought territorial expansion and success, his death in 1241 had profound consequences for the Mongol Empire. The decision to break the empire into distinct administrative regions, called khanates, contributed to its eventual fragmentation. The empire had grown so vast that it became difficult to govern as a unified entity, and the expansionist ambitions of different branches of Genghis Khan's family created tensions. The Mongol Empire was divided into several khanates, each ruled by one of Genghis Khan's descendants. These khanates were the Yuan dynasty in China. This khanate, which eventually became the Yuan dynasty, was ruled by Genghis Khan's grandson, Kublai Khan. The Golden Horde, a powerful khanate that controlled much of Russia, led by Batu Khan, Genghis Khan's grandson. The Ilkhanate, this khanate controlled Persia and parts of the Middle East, led by Hulagu Khan, another grandson of Genghis Khan. The Chagatai Khanate, this region covered much of Central Asia, led by Genghis Khan's second son, Chagatai. While these khanates were all nominally under the rule of Genghis Khan's descendants, they often operated independently. This decentralization eventually led to a lack of cohesion and rivalries between the khanates, weakening the unity of the empire and contributing to its eventual fragmentation. Kublai Khan and the Yuan dynasty. The most significant successor to Genghis Khan was his grandson, Kublai Khan, who would go on to establish the Yuan dynasty in China. Kublai Khan's reign was one of the most transformative periods in the history of the Mongol Empire. His achievements, while rooted in his grandfather's legacy, would also reflect his own unique vision. Kublai Khan's most notable achievement was the conquest of the Song dynasty in southern China. By 1279, after a prolonged and difficult war, Kublai succeeded in unifying China under Mongol rule. This marked the first time that China had been fully unified under a non-native ruler. Kublai's conquest of China was marked by his adoption of Chinese customs and governance systems. He recognized the importance of bureaucracy and civil administration, and he implemented many of the systems that would help to sustain the Yuan dynasty. Kublai's reign, however, was not without challenges. He faced internal resistance from the native Chinese population, who were hostile to Mongol rule. Additionally, Kublai struggled to maintain control over the vast territory his family had conquered, and the Mongol Empire as a whole faced difficulties due to the division of power between the khanates. Despite these challenges, Kublai Khan's rule is regarded as one of the high points of Mongol history. His leadership contributed to the spread of Mongol influence in China, as well as in the broader East Asian region. The Yuan dynasty, while short-lived, played an important role in integrating China into the larger Mongol Empire, fostering trade, and promoting cultural exchanges that would shape East Asia for centuries. Batu Khan and the Golden Horde. Another significant branch of the Mongol family was Batu Khan, who ruled the Golden Horde in the western part of the Mongol Empire. Batu's territory included much of modern-day Russia and parts of Eastern Europe. Under Batu's leadership, the Golden Horde expanded further into the heart of Russia, defeating the Kievan Rus and establishing the dominance of the Mongols over much of the region. The Golden Horde's influence over Russia would continue for centuries, even as the Mongols began to lose control over the rest of their empire. Batu Khan's descendants ruled the region until the 15th century, leaving a lasting legacy in Russian history. The Mongol occupation of Russia also had profound cultural and political consequences, contributing to the centralization of power in Moscow and the eventual rise of the Russian Empire. Hulagu Khan and the Ilkhanate. Hulagu Khan, another of Genghis Khan's grandsons, founded the Ilkhanate, a khanate that controlled Persia and much of the Middle East. Hulagu's most famous military campaign was the destruction of the Abbasid Caliphate in 1258, when he captured Baghdad and put an end to one of the most powerful and prosperous Islamic empires of the medieval period. The fall of Baghdad marked the end of the Islamic Golden Age and had long-lasting repercussions for the Middle East. However, the Ilkhanate was plagued by internal conflict, as different factions within the Mongol leadership struggled for control. Despite these challenges, the Ilkhanate survived for several generations, influencing the development of Persian culture and politics. The decline of the Mongol Empire. By the end of the 13th century, the Mongol Empire was in decline. The Khanates, once united under the leadership of Genghis Khan, were increasingly isolated from each other. The once cohesive military force was now divided, and each Khanate faced challenges of governance, rebellion, and external threats. Despite the early successes of his descendants, the Mongol Empire was unable to maintain its vast holdings for long. However, the Mongols left an indelible mark on the world. The Mongol conquests had opened up vast trade routes, leading to an era of cultural exchange between East and West. The Mongols had facilitated the movement of goods, ideas, and technologies across Eurasia, leaving a legacy that would influence the course of world history long after the empire itself had fragmented. The fall of the Mongol Empire, causes and consequences. By the late 13th and early 14th centuries, the Mongol Empire had reached its zenith. However, the once unified and unstoppable force that Genghis Khan had created was beginning to unravel. The empire, divided into several khanates, was experiencing internal conflicts, external pressures, and the natural consequences of such an expansive and diverse empire. The decline of the Mongol Empire would ultimately pave the way for the rise of new powers across Eurasia, but the impact of the Mongols would echo through history long after their empire had fragmented. The internal division of the khanates. One of the key factors contributing to the decline of the Mongol Empire was the fragmentation of the empire into separate khanates. After the death of Genghis Khan, the vast territory he had conquered was divided among his descendants, each ruling over their own region. While this system worked for a time, the lack of centralized authority soon began to create fissures within the Mongol Empire. The Mongol khanates, such as the Yuan dynasty in China, the Ilkhanate in Persia, the Golden Horde in Russia, and the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, became increasingly isolated from one another. Although they shared a common Mongol heritage and nominal loyalty to the Great Khan, each Khanate was more or less independent, often pursuing its own interests. This decentralization weakened the unity that had been so crucial to the empire's success. Furthermore, the rivalry between different branches of Genghis Khan's family exacerbated the divisions. Successors often clashed over leadership and territory, leading to civil wars and conflicts that weakened the empire. The rivalry between Kublai Khan of the Yuan dynasty and other Mongol rulers, for example, caused significant friction and strife, ultimately undermining the unity of the empire. Economic strains and overextension. Another critical factor in the decline of the Mongol Empire was the empire's overextension. At its peak, the Mongol Empire stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the shores of the Mediterranean, covering vast swathes of territory. While this geographical expanse provided the Mongols with access to numerous trade routes and resources, it also proved to be a double-edged sword. The Mongol Empire's enormous size created logistical challenges that strained its resources. The empire's military, which had once been a highly mobile and formidable force, struggled to maintain control over distant provinces. The vast distance between the different khanates made communication and coordination difficult, and rebellions in far-off regions were harder to suppress. Additionally, the Mongols had to manage a wide range of diverse cultures, religions, and societies, each with its own traditions and economic systems. Although the Mongol rulers, particularly Kublai Khan, were known for their religious tolerance, the diversity within the empire often led to friction and unrest. As the Mongol Empire tried to maintain its hold on such a vast and culturally diverse region, it faced economic strains that were difficult to overcome. The Black Death and its impact. One of the most significant events that contributed to the collapse of the Mongol Empire was the spread of the Black Death, which devastated the world in the mid-14th century. The plague, which likely originated in China or Central Asia, spread rapidly through the Silk Road, which had been re-established under the Mongols. The Mongols, who had facilitated the movement of goods, people, and ideas across Eurasia, inadvertently played a role in the spread of the disease. The Black Death decimated the population of Europe, the Middle East, and large parts of Asia. In China, the death toll was catastrophic, with estimates suggesting that up to 30% of the population perished. The pandemic disrupted trade routes, caused widespread economic collapse, and led to the breakdown of political systems. The Mongol Empire, already weakened by internal divisions, was hit particularly hard. The death of so many people undermined the empire's ability to maintain its vast administrative apparatus and military strength. In the Yuan dynasty in China, the Black Death contributed to the weakening of Mongol rule. By the 1360s, rebellion and discontent with Mongol rule were widespread, and the Yuan dynasty eventually fell in 1368, replaced by the Ming dynasty, which was composed of native Chinese rulers. The Ilkhanate in Persia also succumbed to internal instability and the effects of the plague, eventually fragmenting and collapsing into smaller regional states. The decline of the Golden Horde. In Russia, the Golden Horde saw its power erode over time. While the Mongols had ruled over Russia for centuries, their influence began to wane in the 14th and 15th centuries. The disintegration of the Golden Horde was accelerated by internal struggles for power among the Mongol rulers, as well as pressure from the rising Muscovite state, centered around Moscow. As Moscow grew in power, it began to challenge the Mongols. Ivan III of Moscow, also known as Ivan the Great, famously refused to pay tribute to the Golden Horde in the 1480s, marking the beginning of the end for Mongol rule in Russia. By the late 15th century, the Mongols had been driven from Russia, and the Grand Duchy of Moscow emerged as the dominant power in the region. The Ilkhanate and the fall of Persia. In the Ilkhanate, the Mongols had ruled Persia for several decades, but the state suffered from internal conflict and external threats. The Ilkhanate experienced a series of succession crises and power struggles, weakening the central authority. The Mongol rulers of Persia were also heavily influenced by the local population, and many adopted Persian customs, culture, and Islam. Over time, this integration of Mongols into Persian society created a hybrid ruling class, which further eroded the unity of the Ilkhanate. By the 14th century, the Ilkhanate had fragmented, and smaller regional powers began to assert their independence. Persia eventually fell under the control of the Timurid Empire in the late 14th century, under the leadership of Timur, Tamerlane, who was a descendant of Genghis Khan through his father's side. The end of the Mongol Empire. By the mid-14th century, the once mighty Mongol Empire had fragmented into several smaller, weakened states. While these states continued to exert influence in their respective regions, the unity and power of the Mongol Empire had dissipated. The final blow to the Mongol Empire came as a result of internal divisions, economic strain, the Black Death, and the rise of new powers. In China, the Ming dynasty established itself as a new, dominant force after overthrowing the Mongol Yuan dynasty in 1368. In Russia, the Mongols were gradually pushed out by the Muscovites, culminating in the eventual collapse of the Golden Horde. In Persia, the Ilkhanate disintegrated, and regional powers took control. Despite the empire's collapse, the Mongol legacy endured. The Mongols had left an indelible mark on the world, shaping the course of history in ways that would echo for centuries. The Pax Mongolica, or Mongol peace, had facilitated trade and cultural exchange across Eurasia, leaving behind a legacy of interconnectedness that would eventually lead to the flourishing of the Renaissance in Europe and the rise of global trade. The Mongols, despite their empire's collapse, had irrevocably altered the course of world history, establishing a vast network of trade routes and contributing to the spread of knowledge, technology, and culture. The world that emerged after the fall of the Mongol Empire was forever shaped by their conquests and innovations. The legacy of the Mongol Empire, a world transformed. While the Mongol Empire fractured into distinct khanates and ultimately collapsed, its legacy lived on, leaving a profound and lasting impact on global history. The influence of the Mongols reached across continents, shaping not only the political landscape but also cultural exchanges, trade, technology, and even the course of subsequent empires and nations. The Mongols, through their conquests and administration, shaped the future of Eurasia in ways that would echo for centuries. The Pax Mongolica, a period of unprecedented connectivity. One of the most enduring legacies of the Mongol Empire was the Pax Mongolica, or the Mongol Peace. While the Mongols were known for their brutality in battle, they also established a period of relative peace and stability across much of Eurasia, particularly between the 13th and 14th centuries. This peace was a crucial factor in facilitating cultural and economic exchanges across the vast expanse of the empire. Under the Mongols, the Silk Road, the ancient network of trade routes connecting China, Central Asia, the Middle East, and Europe, flourished like never before. The Mongol Empire secured and protected these routes, ensuring safe passage for merchants, diplomats, and travelers. This allowed for the exchange of not only goods like silk, spices, and precious metals, but also ideas, technologies, and cultural practices. The spread of paper, gunpowder, and printing from China to the West, and the transmission of Persian and Arabic knowledge to Europe, were pivotal in shaping the course of world history. The Mongol Empire also facilitated the movement of people across continents. Traders, scholars, and artisans traveled along the Silk Road, fostering cross-cultural interactions that had a profound influence on the arts, sciences, and philosophy in both the East and the West. The introduction of Chinese porcelain, Persian rugs, and Islamic architecture to Europe and other regions left a lasting imprint on local cultures. The Mongols and the spread of technology. The Mongols played a significant role in the transmission of technology across the empire. The most notable example is the spread of gunpowder. Although gunpowder was invented in China, it was the Mongols who were instrumental in bringing this technology to the West. As Mongol armies encountered various cultures and empires, they adopted and improved upon technologies, particularly in the field of warfare. The Mongols also helped to spread the use of the compass and printing. The compass, originally used by Chinese sailors, became crucial for navigation across the seas, especially as European explorers began their voyages. The Mongols' role in bringing these technologies to the West would be crucial for the age of exploration, which would transform the world in the following centuries. Another technological legacy was in military tactics. The Mongols introduced innovations such as feigned retreats and hit-and-run tactics in warfare. These tactics, which emphasized mobility, surprise, and psychological warfare, would be adopted by later military powers. Mongol siege tactics, which included the use of catapults and gunpowder-based weapons, influenced the development of military strategies in both the Islamic world and Europe. The cultural exchange and the Mongol influence on art. The cultural impact of the Mongol Empire is perhaps most evident in the arts. The Mongols were patrons of the arts and supported the creation of vibrant and unique artistic expressions that blended elements from various cultures under their rule. The fusion of Mongol, Persian, Chinese, and Central Asian styles led to a unique and distinctive form of art, particularly in the realms of illustration, architecture, and textiles. In China, the Mongols adopted Chinese artistic traditions, incorporating them into their own imperial projects. The Yuan dynasty saw the creation of beautiful Chinese-style paintings, ceramics, and poetry. The Mongols also played a significant role in the development of Mongol-style art, which was influenced by Persian and Central Asian designs. This synthesis of different artistic traditions produced a rich cultural heritage that would continue to influence art and architecture in both China and the Middle East. In Persia, The Mongols contributed to the development of Islamic art by incorporating elements of Mongol military culture, such as the use of bright colors and intricate patterns, into Persian manuscripts and miniatures. These influences can still be seen in Persian carpets, ceramics, and textiles to this day. The rise of new powers and the legacy of Mongol governance. The Mongol Empire, despite its collapse, left a blueprint for governance that influenced the development of new empires in its wake. The Ottoman Empire, which emerged in the 14th century, adopted many of the administrative structures and military tactics of the Mongols, blending them with Islamic traditions. The Ottomans, like the Mongols, ruled over vast and diverse territories, using military prowess and effective governance to maintain control. In Russia, the Mongol influence was particularly significant. The Mongols' rule over Russia, known as the Tatar yoke, lasted for more than 2 centuries, and its impact on Russian culture, politics, and military organization was profound. The Mongols contributed to the centralization of power in Russia, setting the stage for the rise of the Russian Empire under the Tsars. The Muscovite state, in particular, borrowed heavily from Mongol models of governance, including the use of tribute systems and military organization. In China, the Mongols' establishment of the Yuan dynasty left an indelible mark on Chinese governance and culture. While the Yuan dynasty was eventually replaced by the Ming dynasty, many of the Mongol administrative practices, such as the use of a centralized bureaucracy and a system of taxation, were retained by the Ming rulers. The Mongols also introduced a more cosmopolitan worldview, encouraging the integration of foreign cultures into Chinese society. The decline of Mongol influence and the legacy in modern times. By the late 14th century, the Mongol Empire had fractured into smaller states, and their influence began to wane. However, the legacy of the Mongols remains embedded in the fabric of global history. The Mongols were instrumental in reshaping the geopolitical landscape of Eurasia, and their empire served as a bridge between the East and West, facilitating trade, cultural exchange, and technological innovation. The Mongols left a legacy of military innovation, governance, and cultural syncretism that influenced the development of subsequent empires and states. Their contributions to the spread of ideas, technologies, and goods would have far-reaching consequences, especially in the realms of exploration and global trade. The rise of the Ming dynasty, the Ottoman Empire, and the Russian Empire can all be traced, in part, to the foundations laid by the Mongol Empire. In modern times, the legacy of the Mongols is still visible in the regions they once ruled. From the Great Wall of China to the cities of Samarkand and Baghdad, Mongol influence remains a part of the historical and cultural landscape of Eurasia. The Mongol Empire remains one of the most remarkable and impactful empires in history, and its story continues to captivate historians, scholars, and enthusiasts around the world. As the Mongol Empire crumbled, it left behind a legacy that would continue to shape the world for centuries. The empire's impact on trade, technology, and culture still echoes through history, influencing the rise of new powers and laying the groundwork for the modern world. While the Mongols may no longer rule the vast land they once controlled, their mark on the history of Eurasia and the entire globe remains undeniable. From military tactics to cultural exchange, their story is far from over. So, whether you're a history buff or just curious about one of the most extraordinary empires ever, the Mongol Empire's journey proves that even the greatest empires eventually fade, but their legacy lives on forever.